Hello, this is Virtualis the Chess Noob, learning and having fun with chess. Mistakes and blunders are an inevitable part of being a beginner playing chess. In this game, I made 3 blunders, each which we'll examine in turn. Please enjoy! Let's start having a look at the review. So this is chess.com's algorithm and not a super accurate game, 74.2%, and 3 blunders, 1, 2, and 3. So we'll look at each of these blunders in context in the game, and there's some learning to be had with each of those blunders. In this game, I played white, opponent black, and I started with e4. Opponent played d5, the Scandinavian defense. Now, in Scandinavian defense, I usually would capture. Opponent captures with queen. I develop knight c3, and they play queen a5. So all very standard sort of opening, very standard Scandinavian opening at the moment. Now, I recently saw in a YouTube sort of video by another content creator the Leonhardt Gambit, which is pawn to b4, immediately attacking the queen, and if the opponent accepts the gambit, then rook can go to the b file. So in this game, I played the Leonhardt Gambit, b4. Opponent chose not to accept the gambit, playing queen e5 with check. So I play my queen e2 with check. I often actually find, in fact, with the Scandinavian, that it's often better just to trade queens early, play a queenless middle game. That often works quite well for me. Opponent opted not to capture immediately and instead played knight c6. So I played knight f3, developing my other knight. They withdraw queen to e6, which I thought was interesting. And in this position, I played b5 with an attack on the knight. At this point, they opted to capture my queen with their queen, so potentially a loss of tempo by the opponent, and I captured back with bishop. Now, interesting that apparently king captures here is the best move. I'm not entirely sure why that would be the case. Opponent now plays knight b4, and potentially with an attack on the c2 pawn. Now here I make my first blunder. I play knight d4, and now the idea here is that I wanted to defend that pawn with the knight, and the reason why that simply doesn't work is that the opponent can play e5, attacking the knight. I either lose the knight or am forced to move the knight away, and by deflecting the knight, the opponent can now capture c2 with knight, with a fork of the king and rook, leading to a loss of that rook. So that is why it's almost 3.5 points favoring the opponent. So this was a blunder. A better way to defend the c2 pawn would have been to play no, not that move. Play bishop d1, and that would have defended that pawn. And I think, okay, interesting. The Stockfish here thought maybe just b1, moving the rook out of the way was a reasonable move as well. Opponent develops knight f6, so didn't see that serious attack, and so in doing so blunders themselves because it now they lose that potential advantage. They had to find that accurate move to punish my blunder. So I now attack the knight. They retreat. They retreat the knight to d5, and here knight captures knight. Knight captures knight back. I short castles. Opponent plays e6. I now play c4, again immediately attacking their knight in the center of the board. So I feel reasonably happy about my pawns on the queen side, so dominating the space. Opponent plays knight f4, which was a good move with sort of an attack on that bishop. Here I played bishop f3. Opponent develops their bishop to d6. I play g3, and as I made that move, I did wonder whether or not that was going to be a bad move because I could be potentially weakening the defense of my king, but I really didn't like that knight being there and I wanted to kick it out. So knight h3 with check, and I here opted to move the king forward, potentially with an attack on the knight. Knight retreats back to g5, which was the best move, and I decided to move bishop back to e2, moving it out of striking distance of the knight. Opponent now plays e5 with an attack on my knight, and here I made my second blunder. I think I simply didn't see the fact that the opponent now had an open diagonal for their light colored bishop, and so pretty much did a one move blunder. Knight f5, the bishop captured knight, and when they made the move, I went, what? I simply was blind to that diagonal, and so the opponent is straight up one piece, so not very happy here. Decided to try to kick the bishop out. So bishop with check. I did think that they might do that, but that is okay. I can now play f3. That pawn is sort of defended by me. By three ways. So I'm at no risk of the opponent trying to capture that pawn, and the opponent is now forced to move the bishop a second time. So moving to g6. So again, potentially wasted a move. I struck in the center with d4, and also now a discovered attack on the knight. They opted to capture the pawn, allowing me to basically equalize the piece, capturing their knight in a sort of very relatively similar way. So pawn move, discovered attack. Effectively, I suppose that in that other one, that wasn't quite a discovered attack. I moved my knight into where it might have been a discovered attack. So here I felt happy. I felt that at least I got material balance again, though I did feel that perhaps these pawns may have been overextended. And even though I had a relative material balance, so opponent's only one pawn up, I did think that they may have had a better position, potentially a passed pawn as well. And Stockfish agrees, so almost 5 points in favor of black in this position. Opponent plays h6, which is good. I played bishop h4, so I was thinking of rotating my bishop here. And in fact, that's what happened. Captures, I was happy to capture, bring the king back. And I felt that now that there was only one bishop here left, one bishop, pawn, rook, I thought I was probably okay here. That it wasn't quite a cocoon with my knight, but it wasn't going to be that easy for the opponent to try to crack open the king's defenses. They long castle. I bring rook to the d file with a sort of bringing attack towards that pawn. And I need to stop that pawn because it is a passed pawn. They've moved that pawn forward, bring the bishop back to f1. They bring the h-file pawn forward, which is probably not a good move because I was now able to just bring my king forward, and it's not so easy for that pawn now to advance. Now, this was an error for the opponent because their pawn basically is just too far forward. It is just too far forward, and if they try to, make things open, that's not really going to work because basically I have a rook a2, which is what I played, and they are just not fast enough to be able to defend that pawn. So here they sort of make a good bishop move. However, I was simply able to retreat my bishop out of the way. Stockfish thought taking was better. I wasn't so convinced about that. They capture a pawn, but now I capture that pawn back, now with a sort of attack against their rook. But their passed pawn I've now been able to neutralize. And my pawns are more developed than their pawns. So I felt that I was particularly the opponent has lost their advantage, and again, Stockfish agrees. Captures, 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 and now I've got a discovered check, so effectively winning a sort of tempo effectively. Now with the king in that position, this rook cannot move out of the back rank unless they want back rank mate until they move potentially some of these pawns, again buying me some time. I move rook d5, attack on that bishop. So again, wasting some of their time, but potentially also thinking about giving an attack on that pawn, either this way or that way. Opponent makes the right move, staying on that diagonal. And here I thought I made a very clever move with rook f5. And the reason, however, why this is a blunder is that now the opponent has an opportunity to capture my bishop. I cannot actually capture back without the opponent pinning my rook well, basically skewering my rook, against the king, so pinning it. Basically, they're going to be able to capture that rook. So that wasn't actually a good move, as you can see. It was a blunder. However, the opponent didn't see that. And instead tried to defend their pawn with rook f8. Now that was a mistake because now I can push that pawn forward. They cannot capture because that pawn is pinned to their rook. Opponents, I suppose, doing sort of last ditch sort of attack on the rook, and that's another blunder because that simply doesn't work, because now I've got rook captures pawn, now an attack on both the rook and the bishop, and the opponent cannot save both. And so rook captures rook, pawn now captures rook, and promotion now is unavoidable. Opponent makes a sort of random pawn move. Bishop catches bishop, and here the opponent resigns. So obviously next turn will be pawn to queen promotion, and the game is basically lost. So this was a good game. 3 blunders, still managed to win. GG to the opponent. I played this game quickly in the morning, and this showed when I undertook the analysis. Each of these blunders could have been avoided by considering more deeply how my opponent would have responded prior to actually making the move. However, I managed to win anyway. At the beginner intermediate level, it's not necessarily who blunders first or the most, but who blunders last. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.